One of the greatest risks, not only of work sites, but any place where people are working at a height, is the danger of falling objects. Now this of course includes building materials, but it also extends to the tools being used themselves. There are a number of systems out there that are designed to prevent injuries from falling objects. Some are quite expensive, some are completely ineffective, or just lacking that user-friendly side that's needed. However, I was quite excited when I stumbled upon an offering by one company in particular, Grips, who were kind enough to sit with me and explain some of the issues in the market, as well as some of the products on offer. Enjoy.
So we've been in the construction industry for a long time. We're in a business that started in 1993. We got into safety products in 2005, 2006. Dealt a lot with the scaffolding industry, and we were getting a lot of call for a decent tool tethering products because scaffolders, being a very high-risk industry, have a lot of dropped objects. It was starting to hit the radar. At that stage, in around 2007, between 2007 and 2010, it was the number 2 cause of fatalities. So it was the second highest cause of fatalities on construction sites. And there wasn't a decent, there was no decent systems for the tethering of tools. Pretty much it was just a 1 metre long lanyard or a 1.5 metre long lanyard, and that was all there was available. Well, generally speaking, it doesn't have to be an injury. So every dropped object, according to WorkSafe, is a reportable incident. That would be even if it falls inside a drop zone. And often it would shut the site down. So we did a study a few years ago on a tape measure that was dropped at a power station during a shutdown in central Queensland. The estimated cost, after they'd shut the site down, done the safety talks, done the incident reviews and so forth, was about $85,000. WorkSafe Australia have just put out a statement about a recent incident, and their numbers are that in construction there's been 5 deaths in 5 years and over 700 injuries. And that would be a serious injury, which means that the injury caused at least a week off work. If you look outside of construction, you're talking thousands. So I believe last year there was about 17 deaths from dropped objects across Australia, across every work area. Serious injuries around about 3,500, between 3 and 3,500. I haven't got the numbers completely accurate, but it works out to about 12 a day. The big question is how much stuff goes unreported. And with the amount of dropped objects that we're hearing about at the moment, it's very much in the hot spot in the in industry, and it's honestly, we're calling it dropped object roulette at the moment, because we only hear about the ones that do get dropped. So there's been 2 major ones in Collins Street just last week. The first one was a 450mm shifter. So 450mm long, weighs about 1 kilo. Crane crew dropped it from level 25, which would roughly be about 75 metres. Landed in Exhibition Street. It was a project on the corner of Collins and Exhibition Street. So a 1 kilo tool dropped 75 metres, would have been travelling about 130 kilometres an hour when it hit the road. It landed in the median strip and would have impacted with about 650 kilos of force. So there's nothing that you can do that's going to, if that hit someone, it wouldn't have even slowed down before it hit the road. While we do tend to focus on the great heights, an item doesn't actually have to fall very far, and it doesn't have to be very heavy to pick up momentum and you know, the impacts forces start really rising. So we've just put on we're using a bit of an ambassador, if you like, a guy from Queensland, from Brisbane, who's a dropped objects victim. So it's a really sad story. He's a middle-aged bloke. He's one of our English friends who's come out to live the Aussie dream, and he brought his family out. Middle-aged bloke, had like a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, two younger boys. Got a job in a food processing plant in Brisbane. He's a electrical engineer, technician, and he's working on robots in a big food manufacturing plant in Brisbane. He was on the floor working on a robot. There was a guy above him who wasn't meant to be there, levering some steelwork with a spanner. So the spanner was about 0.7 kilos, not even a kilo, and a bit under a metre long. And when he was levering this machine, this steelwork, the steelworks flicked back and flicked the spanner out of his hands. This guy was only about 4.5 metres above the bloke on the ground. So the spanner's come down and it hasn't even hit him directly, it's deflected before it's hit him. The guy on the ground's bent over working on this machine. This 0.7 kilo tool's come down 4.5 metres, deflected, and then hit him on the back of the head. And this bloke's a big guy, so he played rugby back in England. He's about twice as wide as me. And the injuries, so it compacted his disc at the top of his neck. He's pretty much broke his neck. He didn't have a hard on, but a hard wouldn't have even done anything anyway because he was bending over, so it got him on the back of the neck. But that guy is permanent. He can never work again. In Australia, if you're working at heights, you're working at 1.8 metres. That's what we would be suggesting. If you're working at heights, tether everything. A couple of kilo tool, a 1 kilo tool dropped 6 metres will turn into something like a 30 or 40 kilo tool by the time it actually impacts. Here's what we've put out as part of what we're calling our Target Zero Drops, which is essentially a corporate package that we're offering to, it's a 360-degree package to cover off a whole program around prevention of dropped objects, drop tools and equipment in particular, which is our focus. So it's come out of a couple of things. One of the main things would be to raise awareness around it. So tools and equipment don't tend to get as much coverage as we'd like, but they do account for the most items that are dropped of any category. And the focus tends to be around barricades and barriers, fencing, netting, drop zones are a big one. We're trying to push the conversation a lot more towards don't let it drop in the first place. And while that's not possible with everything, especially materials and all the things that are used on a building and maintenance, construction, sites and projects, tools and equipment are the easiest things to look after. We've just done an email campaign that the action point is to sign up for it. Anyone that signs up for it will be contacted immediately with the full package details, and that'll go through the full scope of what we can offer and the costs that's associated with it. It's also, all our distributors can offer it too. So we can do it via our distributors, and we've got a large distributor, a growing distributor network through the country. Safety shops, industrial suppliers, height safety shops, all those sort of guys coming on board with it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's one of the beauties of our range, and it's one of our biggest points is that you don't have to get new tools. So in previous times, what's generally happened is that there's companies around that do toolkits and stuff for works at height, primarily coming out of the oil and gas industry. And essentially what they'll do is they'll go and get a claw hammer. You know, it might be a $40 claw hammer. Go and put a hole in it, drill a hole through it, or do something with the hole, create an attachment point, put a tag on it that, yep, you can use this point. And that hammer goes from a $40 hammer to, $250 hammer. So the idea of this is you don't have to do that. You can use all your existing gear, and on your existing gear you can get load-rated certified points without going and buying new kit. It's a service that some of our distributors actually offer, a till tethering service, so that you can get your kit, take it into them. They'll attach points for you and send you away with your kits with, tethers might be part of a tool belt or how it works, but get it set up for you. The other thing that helps is the trade-specific kits that we do. So we've got a number of trade-specific kits. So we sat down with trades, worked out their main tools, and pulled together a kit for them, which pretty much comes like a first aid kit, if you like. It's a little bag with a list of all the stuff in it. And that way you can get your kit and your set, because it does become a little bit daunting. It's a bit daunting seeing this full range of products spread out and you don't really know what's what. But if you've got a trade-specific kit, because everything comes with instructions as well. We've got a little manual, a little book that goes through all the do's and don'ts. So it'll have the attachment points, how you attach it, how you don't attach it, and the sort of the methodology that we use to attach your tools. There's numerous ways you can do it. So as far as use of the tool, there's what we call our CAT methodology, C-A-T-T, which is part of our training package, which is your connection point, your anchor point, your tether, and then your transport and storage. So this, if you look at that holistically, the main key as far as using it practically would be your anchor point. So that's a matter of surveying what you're doing, how you're doing it, the tools you're using, and once you've got, what your anchor points are, as far as which is going to be your wrist, your waist, or an external structural bag, then you can work out how far you're going to have to move, so your length of your tether. Whether you're going to, a lot of different tools, so you don't want, if you've got 10 tools, you don't want 10 tethers, so you're going to be ideally working off your wrist or a tool belt. So it's really, really practical. Once you get your head around it, follow that methodology, it works great. And guys who use it won't tend to go back on it. I guess the first thing is that they all come from everything that we do, all the products that we do, all the systems, all the innovations and ideas and so forth come from the trade. So that kind of makes it practical. Everything we do is to the highest quality possible. We're not interested in cheap solutions. There are suppliers out there that sell bits and pieces cheaper. We're not interested in competing in that market. Everything we do has to be of the highest order. That makes it practical. And out of that springs all these little practical things like, the carabiners, for example, now are all on a dual action carabiner. They're all aluminium, so they're lightweight. We put little swivels in every point we can to prevent against tangles and catches. We're finding retractors really, really popular. One of the biggest complaints would be, as you say, having a rope hanging off you. Well, that can be a catch hazard, especially if you're a scaffolder and you've got 5 or 6 lanyards on a belt. You look like an octopus, I think in the range at the moment there's probably only about 150 lines, and we're trying to cover off every trade known to man, I mean, you take a rope access crew that we do a lot with. So a rope access guy does everything. He might be an electrician, might be a painter, he might be, a facade guy. He could be anything. So we do have to cover it, but what we try and do is the products that we come up with, we try and make them cover off as many different scenarios as possible, so that it's not too trade specific. We're getting more and more distributors on board as the message gets out there that this is a good way to work, and it's a good product, and it's practical and it's efficient, and no one wants to drop anything anyway. There's more and more guys coming on board. So we do have the website, which is a really good resource. It's fairly new and it's constantly growing. We're constantly putting more stuff in it. So the website's great. And then on top of that, we've got a network of distributors right through the country and further. But locally, number of Total Tools have it. All the major height safety shops, so guys that would focus on rope access and specialised height safety work, so they'd focus on harnesses and anyone who's doing high risk professional safety work. They have really good displays and they're really good guys. They're professional guys, they know what they're doing. They have good displays and good stock and really good expertise. And then there's a smattering of general safety stores as well that would have it available. A good estimate for a trade person to give themselves a not bad kit, maybe a starter's kit, initial pack, maybe get themselves kitted out as a kickoff, especially if they've never used it before, because there's going to be a bit of trial and error. That wouldn't really cost them any more than $200. The trade kits are between 150, 200, maybe a little bit more, maybe 220, but that's going to get you a decent starting pack. It's actually a good way to start too, because as I say, getting used to it, finding out what you like, what you don't. There's a fair bit of scope for personal preference inside it, and that'll give you a bit of everything, attachment points, different length tethers, different weights, maybe a retractor or two. And we find really, really quick the trades that use it will come out and say, right, love that, hate that, that's great, that's not going to work, and they'll know exactly what they want really quickly. It becomes an efficient way to work just through the nature of it. First thing would be, you go up a height and there's a bit of a tendency to take the whole toolbox up. Well, if you're going to start tethering stuff, you're going to be questioning how much stuff you actually want to take up there if you're going to tether it. So you're going to start cutting back on what you take up there. The second thing is your tool organisation, because it does lend itself to tool organisation where you got things like retractors. So we're seeing guys. There's a little what we call a tool grapple, which is a really heavy duty compact retractor that does 2.5 kilos. You can hook to a handrail. You might have a guy working out of an EWP. You might have 3 or 4 tools. He's got 3 or 4 of our tool grapples. He can just hook his tools up, and he doesn't have to go anywhere. He's got nothing on the floor of the basket. It's all just neat and tidy. It's got enough force to hold it up at a nice height, so he's just reaching for it as he goes with nothing in the way. Our online is www.grips.com.au. Grips is with a double P, GRIPPS. Facebook the same. You can find us on Facebook. We do a lot on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty active Instagram account too, and a Twitter feed where we keep up to date. We post a few incidences and news and things that are happening on Twitter as well. So we're on all platforms.
Perfect.